I'll be speaking exactly about that. Is there anything one can say in face of tragedy? And the answer is truly there's nothing to say. I put it in simple terms, a most brilliant mind cannot speak to a bleeding heart. And even in an attempt to do so is either arrogance or just foolishness, because the fact is, though we like to say words and we'd like to say something, but the pain is just too great when you go visit someone who's just lost a family member, a parent, a child, and especially in a terrible way. What are you going to say exactly? So I'm reminded of maybe the best expression one could say is, as one Hasidic Rebbe told a disciple of his who had suffered a tragedy. He said to him, I have no answers for you, but I can cry with you. And there's something about crying with each other, that sense of vulnerability, shared vulnerability, it in itself is maybe the best answer of all. So it's not silence that comes from weakness or retreat or being afraid, the awkwardness. It's really a silence that is greater than sound, in the sense that the mind, with all its power and with all its brilliance, simply is too small of a container to contain and explain tragedies. And for that matter, any death and any loss in life. And as such, recognizing that, humbly recognizing that, is in itself one of the most important and dignified things we can do. You know, today happens to be the 16th yahrzeit of my father. Today, on the 20th, in the Hebrew month of Iyar, the 20th day. So it all comes back to me the 16 years ago. I remember 5:07 in the afternoon when my father's soul separated from his body. It was the most traumatic and dramatic event in my life. Thank God I've been blessed. Many blessings in my life, and I appreciate them. I hope I appreciate them. But this was more, and it wasn't, he was 70 years old, he had diabetes. He was 70 years old. No, he wasn't ripped away from me when I was a 5-year-old child. But still, a death is a death. And I remember vividly, I had gone and consoled many people in my life, but I never experienced it quite personally that way. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. And there was this a sense of the overwhelming sense that I do not have anything, any tools with which to process this. And I realized that's exactly the way it should be. I realized something even further, more, that it's not just the death, that you realize the mystery of life itself. The thing is, we never question that. Why are we born? Why do we have happy times? Why can life have so many blessings? We only ask the question when we're really uncomfortable and when something is torn away from us. But I realized, especially in time, that it really death exposes the true mystery and mystique of life, where as much as our minds are great, but they're overrated when it comes to the full experience of life and its entire spectrum of life. The mind understands, the mind can process, but there are many experiences the mind cannot relate to. It maybe can sense, even truth itself, sensing a higher truth, a higher reality. The mind can't. The mind is the mechanics of it, the logical mechanics, the formula, the recipe, the technical details. But the life is experience. Try to explain to the mind what love is. Yeah, the mind can say, okay, I accept, I sense the truth of it, but can you fully analyze it? Like you would a mathematical equation. And I bring it back to what happened this past Thursday night, Miron. For those of you that are not familiar with the background, this is a place of the burial place of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a great sage and mystic who lived in the 2nd century. But he was a significant sage. Well, they're all significant, but he was significant in the sense that he brought together both the revealed and the esoteric dimensions of teachings, the mystical and the legal. And as such, he was revered. But on the day of his passing, which was a Lag BaOmer, which would have been this past Friday, the 33rd day of the Omer, which is the 18th day of Iyar, actually 2 days before my father's passing. Not that makes a difference, but just as a point of reference. And he requested that instead of mourning and grieving, this should be a day of joy and celebration. So every year, since then, we're talking now 2nd century, we're now 19 centuries ago, 1900 years, people gathered from all walks of life to celebrate on this day, a day that was seen as a day of blessing, a day of miracles, a day of healing. So every year there's a pilgrimage to Miron, which is northern part of Israel. Essentially 3-hour walk from Tzfat. I know that because some people actually walked this weekend because there were no buses due to the tragedy. And every year come together to dance and sing and celebrate. And this last year, of course, COVID, that was essentially everything was closed down. But this year, they came back together, over 100,000 people. And then due to circumstances, which they're still investigating, so many people, was not managed properly, and people were crushed to death on their way in and way out. I think this was on the way out. It was a narrow place, steps that were slippery, a mess. You could pick up in other news. I'm not here to report on that, just to fill in. So it's really shaken up the Jewish world, for that matter, the entire world, like any tragedy should. And as such, I'm discussing it. So going to get back to on a day like that, a day of celebration, or people coming together to honor a person who brought healing to the world, who brought life to the world. Obviously, the irony and the tragedy is just more compounded. But what it comes down to is, can we speak about, is there anything we can say in the face of tragedy? I'm speaking that there's nothing to say, which itself is an interesting twist. But my point is, it's not about that, it's about recognizing that real experiences in life, especially of this magnitude, are beyond us. But that itself, that we humbly recognize that, is one of the ways we console each other. We hold each other's hand, we can cry together, we realize that we're all very vulnerable and fragile in this large world, as we've seen over this past year as well. And recognizing that instead of trying to deny it or escaping it, is itself gives strength and empowerment. So that's step number one in recognizing it. In that itself, I would like to add that when you study the teachings of mysticism, Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings, one of the things that really strikes you is that what it does is it opens up the horizons of realities that are greater than our own limited consciousness and limited perspectives. It's like climbing a mountain. When you're lower down, you see the horizon to some extent. As you climb up, the horizon gets larger to the point you get up to the peak. The horizon is like essentially infinite, relatively speaking. The same is true when you begin to explore the things that are beyond the here and now, beyond the parameters of material survival and existence. You come to recognize deeper truths within yourself, which very much actually parallels, for instance, quantum mechanics. When you begin to discover that the world is made up not just of elements, but of molecules, and molecules are made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of subatomic particles, and subatomic particles are made up of even subatomic particles. What you're doing is expanding your perspective on reality, and not because you understand it better. You actually come away with a certain element of awe of how much is out there. And the more you know, the more you recognize how much more there is to know. And that's the beauty of it. The same is true, unfortunately, in the negative side. When something like tragedy happens, you suddenly realize that everything you thought about life, have it all figured out. It's not that way. It really opens you up, to use the words of mystics, I'll paraphrase, to a reality that is beyond structures. So usually we have our parameters, our structures that we're comfortable with. This is right, this is wrong, this is life, this is death, this is light, this is day, this is night, darkness, light. So, and that's the structures we live with. But then when something shakes us up, a disruption, what happens is, one second, the definitions that we're so comfortable with, the security blankets that we so much rely upon, suddenly become, either they disappear or they become questionable. So one thing it can do to you, on one hand, it can shake you up to the point you really become demoralized and debilitated. Or what it does is you recognize, 1 second, I'm seeing reality from a place that may not be comfortable, but it's much more real than what I'm comfortable with. Much more real than what I know about. Now, we'd all have to be able to experience that in a positive way, but it doesn't always happen that way. The disruption of the COVID was very much a wake-up call of that nature. Yes, very painful. For some, people lost lives. People became ill. It affected people, the work, school, so many different ways. But in the big picture, it also opened up new opportunities or allowed us to look deeper inside ourselves. When a tragedy of this magnitude takes place, that's not just a regular disruption. This is a serious, because you're talking about lives that were literally crushed. And you start thinking about it, it's like it's insane. It's hard to even imagine. And when the question why, you're not going to find an answer to the why. So yes, we cry and we grieve and we mourn. And we can cry out to God himself and say why. But at the end of the day, you are not going to get an answer why. Your question is going to be, what are you going to do about it? Not why it happened. And it opens you up, yes, to realities that are the ones that we're not comfortable seeing. Because it's not part of the structures of our regular day. It leads us to a place that is beyond life and death, and beyond right and wrong, and beyond good and evil, and beyond day and night, and beyond darkness and light. A place so-called that precedes structure, which then manifested in the structure that ultimately defines the parameters of what we call our comfort zones, or our existing reliable structures. And that's why it's so difficult for us to fully contain. So there's the pain part, which is one thing, but then there's the sheer impossibility that we can't fathom, we can't relate to, we can't understand something of this nature. So what it should evoke is humility. So we're humble people who recognize that there's much more to existence than we will ever know. We don't understand the mysterious plans, the mysterious twists and turns of life. And in that we gain strength, in that lack of knowledge. We don't get weaker. Yes, when you live a life of illusion where you think you're in control of everything, as soon as you're not, we all know what it does to somebody. It really can be extremely demoralizing, or worse. But when you recognize that, no, you're part of something far greater, and this is the mystery of it, it changes perspective. Does it console us? Am I in any way trying to explain? No, I'm not explaining what happened. We all wish it didn't happen. We all wish tragedy never should happen, not to these people, not to anyone. But we recognize that tragedy is part of life's existence. And as I mentioned earlier, one person that affects us all. So that is the most important thing to acknowledge, especially when the grave is open and the wounds are raw. But then comes question number 2. And that is, what are we going to do about it? Because at the end of the day, this is the test of the human spirit. Are you going to be paralyzed and debilitated in a place where you cannot really function? Or are you going to take the energy that grief generates and pain generates and turn it into some type of catalyst for greatness in the memory and the spirit of those that were taken from us, and in memory in general, and in the spirit of the very fact of something like this happens. In other words, creating greater goodness, greater unity, greater love. The last thing you want in situations like this is finger pointing, judgmentalism, condescension. Oh, you're this way, you're that way, that's why this happened, that happened. No. We look inside our own hearts and souls. We're taught that all human beings are one large organism. So even though we don't feel it, but if one arm is hurting, the other arm is also hurting. It would be ridiculous to say, oh, you did something wrong, the right arm, so the left arm will attack the right arm. We're all part of one human existence, the human condition, life itself. And as such, when there's a weakening or there's something that seems to have been lost or was lost to us, we look to find ways to compensate and to build something stronger. That's what healthy people do. And it's really a study both on a microcosmic level and a macrocosmic level. One that can impact even things like recovery, the world of recovery, the world of addiction, the world of people getting through abuse. Because whether it's an individual suffering or it's a collective one, it all comes down to what are you going to do with it. Now, it could destroy a person, God forbid, or it can make one stronger. That which doesn't kill me makes me stronger, as the expression goes. So the real goal and the real purpose of ultimately what we derive from any tragedy is to find that deeper strength. Viktor Frankl, in his logotherapy, Man Search for Meaning, developed these ideas before the Holocaust, but they became confirmed in the Holocaust. He was in the concentration camp and saw that those that had meaning in life did not suffer less, but they had more resources, more tools to be able to hold on and to forge ahead. And that's ultimately how we get through any type of tragedy. It's not by finding an answer. It's not by rationalizing. And it's also not by denial and escaping. It's by looking at it, recognizing the humble recognition of a truth greater than ourselves, of mysteries we will never fathom, and at the same time, there's deeper purpose to life. Whether we find that purpose in the tragedy or not, that depends on the individual. No one can ever tell someone else what they should find and discover through loss. But that we become a stronger person, stronger people, and individually stronger, that is something that we all have the capacity to do. That's what pressure does. Just as Eleanor Roosevelt said about women, that a woman's like a tea bag. You don't know how strong she is until you put her into hot water. Like a tea bag, you don't know how strong it is until you put it into hot water. Same thing we can say about anyone that suffered any tragedy, whether it's individual or collective, that ultimately it brings out deeper strengths. Is that a justification or explanation? Absolutely not. We pray and hope that we should all have beautiful, revealed blessings in our lives and not need to depend on some deeper strength. But when it does happen, we only have that. We have those two options: sink or swim, dig deeper. And that's exactly what we do. Though I did not know any of the individual that was lost in this tragedy last Thursday night, but I really have been shaken by it personally because of the confluence of events, and I'm steeped in this work and this literature of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, the person everyone came to celebrate, and seeing it and experiencing it and seeing the beauty of people dancing and singing about faith and love and unity, and then being crushed like that. How could it not shake any person up when you hear about it? But to me, it's about challenging myself and challenging each one of us, yes, to dig deeper, to be strong together as we stand united now in love and unity more than ever, because that's what keeps us strong, and to figure out what we can do about it to make our life, your life, and my life, and every life better and greater. So with that, let me just say a concluding prayer for each one of you, each one of us. May you only know blessings in your life, reveal blessings, joys. But should there ever be a setback, whether it's a mild setback or a very serious one, where something happens that completely throws you, or someone in your family, or a friend, or you recognize I'm sensitive to the pain of events that may not even be directly biologically connected to you, know and know well that this reveals to us a deeper truth and mysteries of existence that we will never be able to wrap our head around, but we can wrap our life around and realize there are other tools to be able to deal with it. And secondly, make sure that everything always leads to some growth, to some deeper love, to some deeper appreciation, some greater kindness and goodness. And so I'm committed to increasing and doing whatever I can do to both spread this message, but also do things in the honor of these people that were taken from us. Yet time will pass, people forget, we know that. That's also part of the human condition. But what we don't want to forget is the growth that it achieved, that it caused in each one of us. And I strongly suggest that each one of us do the same. And this is true for any tragedy. This is the one that right now we're dealing with. May we not have to deal with anymore. And yes, we did take a break in our programming. I think it was important to do. You have to recognize you can't just do it's not business as usual. There are times that we need to rise to the occasion. And I hope you agree with me about that. I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback, suggestions and ideas. I did actually record a video on Friday, this past Friday, addressing this issue. You can check it out. It's on the different platforms of ours. But in general, any way you can reach me is through meaningfullife.com. There you can post, you can share, suggest, and as well as here on the different social media platforms that we are trying to spread the message. So this has been Simon Jacobson, talking about something I'd rather not talk about, but we need to talk about it. As one great thinker said, it's difficult to speak, but it's more difficult to be silent. So here we are. And technology is a great way to be able to become a larger community, joining together and crying together, but also smiling together as we look at the dignity, the majesty, and the greatness that we can achieve, even under such circumstances. So everyone be blessed and be well and be healthy. May we only hear good news and share good news in a revealed way until this world experiences this full revelation of total goodness that will completely submerge any negativity. Be blessed, my friends, and be well. Thank you.